I grew up under sunny Southern California skies, amongst a big patriotic and God-fearing family. I was taught that one day I might have to go to war to defend freedom. Somewhere along the way, I developed my own definition of what freedom means to me. Motivated by environmental injustice issues, I became a student activist, was elected to my local city council, became a vice mayor, and was politically active at an international level.
今日のキーワードはこちら。はい。ジェイソンが来た。来年7月の北海道洞爺湖サミットを前に反対派の NGO がドイツからやってきました。
I went to Europe and ended up moving to Berlin. I made a friend named Mark, and we had been a part of environmental and global justice movements. But at some point, I started noticing that the police had begun targeting me. Mark and I had been good friends for 5 years. He was a DJ, I played in a band, and we enjoyed going to crazy parties together. Then one day, I came home and opened up a web link that someone had emailed to me. There was Mark's face, and a text that said, "Mark Kennedy exposed as undercover cop." I took to the road and found some others like me, who had been close friends of Kennedy. It turned out that the protest groups my friends and I had been involved with were exactly the kind Mark had been sent to target over his 7-year operation, which had spanned a dozen countries. I wanted answers, but the more questions I asked, the more complicated this operation looked. How was it possible that a British police officer had contracts with the FBI, as well as French and German police, and connections to private security companies? Kennedy also seemed to have a tendency of sleeping with those that he was targeting, including having a 1-year relationship with a good friend of mine.
I was totally shocked when I found out about Kennedy being an undercover cop. I was shocked, and I thought right away about you, and that must have been really hard.
It's hard, but it's not as hard as knowing that my body was invaded by a police department. I mean, he got his orders from a police department, and they knew everything that he was doing all the time.
So about a lawsuit, what would you want to come out of that?
I'd like to have him look me in the eye and talk about this, and I'd like to have the chiefs of that department look me in the eye and realize that we were people. You know, that this wasn't a game, this wasn't some sick video game of spies, and it's real. These are people. These were our lives, and you need to look at us and say that you did wrong. When someone tells you that you were with an undercover cop for a year and a half or whatever, you kind of feel like you're in a movie.
I traveled to meet high-ranking politicians responsible for policing. I wanted to know why an undercover cop was in my Berlin home over the course of 4 years, but politicians seemed even more confused than I about who was in charge of this operation.
I will certainly be following this up with the German Interior Minister to see whether he has any information.
The scope of international spying increasingly appears to operate outside democratic control. I visited the internet activist Sarah Hampton, who was put on an environmental extremist list by Kennedy.
After I met Mark, I was surprised that all of a sudden, I would be sort of treated like Osama bin Laden, I think Mark is actually more interesting for the sort of global apparatus that he represents rather than a particular unique individual spy. Because if you buy that particular line of the story, which is exactly the line of the story the British police are saying, it's a particular spy that went wrong. It may happen to have gone rogue, slept with some women, done some drugs, but in reality, it's an entire system.
Spied Upon shows the reality of today's global systematic spying by telling the human stories of those who have suffered its consequences. As they struggle to create a better world, they expose the motivations behind efforts to stop them.